Hi, this is Andre. I want to talk about Record and Overdub on the Echoplex Digital Pro, not just in terms of how they're traditionally used on most loopers, but in terms of how they interact with one another and how variations on those functions provide some entryways into some advanced Echoplex concepts such as alternate endings, long presses, and sus type functions. In the most basic sense, record is probably the single most important function you have in a looper. If you need to record something, you press record. And so forth. Now, if I play something new on top of that, it doesn't get added to the loop. If I want to add something to the loop, I need to press overdub, and this will add new layers. And so on and so forth. If I close overdub again, and play over the top of the loop, nothing new gets added because I'm not overdubbing. And so forth. Now, if you want to stop the loop on the Echoplex, you have a couple of options. The first is to hit record again, and that starts recording a new loop. But let's say you want to stop the loop and don't immediately want to go into a new loop. That's where the long press of record comes in. If you press record and hold it down, then it goes into reset. Long presses are things that show up in a lot of different functions on the Echoplex, and the idea is that by holding the button down for an extended period of time, you can get it to do something that it doesn't do if you press it very quickly. So, pressing record quickly and releasing starts your loop, pressing it again and releasing quickly closes the loop. If you want to clear out that loop and don't immediately want to record something new, you do a long press of record, and that resets everything. So let's talk about alternate endings of functions, and more specifically we're going to talk about using overdub as an alternate ending to record. Here's a sound that has a fair amount of reverb on it, fairly long decay. Let's listen to what happens if I use record to start and stop the endpoint of the loop. You can hear how the reverb is getting cut off from the second press of record. Now let's say that I wanted to have the reverb tail blend into the rest of the loop as soon as I started overdubbing. If you want to do that, you end record with overdub. So we start record by pressing the record button as we normally do. Then we end with overdub, and you can hear now that the reverb tail isn't getting cut off the way it was the last time. Let's compare those again. Here's ending record with another press of record. The reverb tail gets cut off right at the point where we stopped record. Now let's record the same kind of thing and end with overdub. And now you can hear the reverb tail is being very smooth. Let's say that I want to build up some kind of pad or drone. So if I start by fading in with a volume swell, and then close with record, you can hear there. You can hear the point where I was hitting record, so it's not a smooth transition. Now again, you might really like that hard transition, but let's say you want to have the drone continuing in. You want to have the drone looping seamlessly without that hard cutoff. Reset the loop, record a new loop, and this time I'm going to end record with overdub. Bring my volume knob down, fade in with the volume knob on the guitar. And now you can hear it's a very smooth texture. You're not getting the hard cutoff of record because instead of ending record with a second press of record, I ended it with overdub, which automatically put us into an overdub mode and got rid of any kind of bump or hard cutoff point in the creation of the loop. Now, just like record has a long press function, overdub has a long press function as well. If you do a long press of overdub, then as soon as you release overdub, it will turn off. I'll do that without playing anything first. So there's a regular press of overdub, a quick press gets us into overdub. To get out of overdub, we press it a second time. If you do a long press of overdub, now it's going to stay in overdub until you release the button, and as soon as you release, it's going to stop being in overdub mode. Press, release. Whereas if you do a short press, then it will stay for as long as you have it open until you press it a second time. So just to demonstrate, if I play some stuff over the top, This is going to keep overdubbing until I press it a second time. Let's say that I just want to drop something very short in there. So I'm going to hold it down. And you can hear that the overdub got cut off there because I did a release of it. I had done a long press, and as soon as I released overdub, it stopped overdubbing. So you got that hard kind of cut going into the loop itself. The long press of overdub and being able to cut off the function as soon as you release the button gets us into the subject of sus type commands. Sus commands on the EDP are ones that are only active for as long as you're actually holding down the button. So to access sus variations of record and overdub, we're going to come to the parameter button. We're going to enter the second parameter row. We're going to go to the record column, and the default setting is toggle, T-O-G for toggle. We're going to press record again. That's going to get us into sus. Then we're going to exit the parameters. You can do that either by pressing it several times, or you can also do a long press of parameters. We were just talking about long presses a few minutes ago. Let's say I'm in the parameter editing mode. I'm in record. I decide that I want to go to sus, and then I'm lazy, so I don't want to press it a bunch of times. I want to press it once. Do a long press of parameters. That gets you out of parameter editing. So sus record is only active for as long as you press down the button, which means you can get pretty short loop lengths. And so forth. So this is great for doing glitchy granular stuff. Some people actually prefer having a sus command even if they're not doing really short stuttery loops. I once had an Echoplex student who found that he preferred having a sus action for record, not because he was into doing this really short stuttery glitchy granular stuff, but simply because he preferred the ergonomic feel. So you could also do So you could use a sus record function in that way as well, if you prefer. Now, because you can't really do a long press of record when it's set to sus, you don't have an easy way of doing a reset. If you want to shut up the Echoplex, make it quiet, then you do a quick punch of record without playing anything. That's a new loop. You're not really in reset, but it kind of doesn't matter in a lot of ways. Because if you want to record a brand new loop, you just press record again. If I don't like that, hit record again, and so forth. There are ways of doing a dedicated reset using MIDI commands, but for right now we're not going to worry about that. So let's say that we also want to get into a sus version of overdub. I'm going to clear this out first. So we come back to the parameter function. We go to the second parameter row from the bottom. Now we're going over the overdub column. Toggle, again, is the default overdub setting. That's where it kicks on when you click it, and then to stop overdub, you click it a second time. Now we're going into the sus version of overdub. We're getting out of parameter editing with our long press. And now you have a function where overdub will only be active for as long as you're pressing down the button. So I'm going to record a loop of silence. I'm going to hold a long tone on the guitar, and I'm just going to tap overdub. And you're going to hear that it's just going to drop in fragments of the sound. So it's only overdubbing for as long as I'm pressing down the button. If I hold it down a long time, it'll give me a regular type of overdub. And if I tap it very quickly, then you get those very short bursts of sound. So just using the front panel and without using any kind of fancy MIDI implementation or anything else, you can get some very short stuttery things happening. And again, to make it quiet, tap record. And if you do want to go into a reset, you can go to record mode, go back to toggle, do a long press of record, and you're all set. Let's talk about one other couple of quick things. If you're in parameter editing and you do a long press, that will actually set you back to the default setting. In other words, let's say I'm on sus. If I do a long press of record while I'm in the parameter editing mode, that puts me back to toggle. There is a third record parameter called safe, SAF. The idea of safe is that it always sets feedback to 100% when you begin recording a new loop. Here's where it comes from. A lot of the time, looping musicians will record, I'm setting feedback to 127 there. You'll record your loop, you'll build it up, then you'll want it to taper down, so you'll reduce feedback a little bit. And it fades out like that. What happens to a lot of people, myself included, more times than I can count, is that you'll go to record a brand new loop. You'll forget that feedback was down, and suddenly your great new loop is fading down and you didn't even realize it, and now it's happening in front of an audience and you're all embarrassed. The idea of safe mode is that it always begins a new loop at 100% feedback. So even if I have feedback way down here, if I start recording a new loop, you can hear it keeps repeating at the same level. So safe mode is good if you always want to begin a new loop at 100%. I have to admit it took me many times of forgetting to do that before I got into the habit of setting feedback back to 100% after fading a loop out. So it's not a bad idea. So those are the basics of record and overdub on the Echoplex Digital Pro. Like I say, if you've been looping for a while, these are probably pretty familiar functions in their most basic sense. But things like alternate endings and sus functions and long presses are key parts of the Echoplex architecture. As we get into the other functions, as we expand into multiply, insert, mute, undo, and some of the others, you're going to find that things like alternate endings, long presses, and sus commands are very powerful concepts that show up in a lot of different elements of the Echoplex architecture. So that's a crash course on record and overdub. Thank you so much for tuning in.